Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Erica Smitka. Erica is the executive director of the League of Women Voters of New York State. The League just celebrated our 106th anniversary of defending democracy and protecting and expanding voter rights. We as a nation continue to be in what the League has identified as a constitutional crisis. Erica, we're glad to have you with us this year to talk about what's going on and how all this is playing out in 2026.
Absolutely. Always happy to be here with you, Donna. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming in. So, the League has been very visible this year in speaking out against the ICE crisis and how it is undermining the democratic rule of law in many communities across the nation and right here in New York State as well. Let's first talk about how the League has responded on a national level and why that response is so important this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, as you noted, as a nonpartisan pro-democracy organization that, we are fully believe in kind of due process for everyone in New York State and our country. So we've been deeply alarmed by the ongoing ICE detentions, which often kind of fly in the face of both due process and the fundamental rights of not only New Yorkers, but individuals across the country. Really, it's some of those actions that really get at some of those basic tenets of our democracy and how and why our democracy works effectively, is because it's based on these principles of equity, equitable treatment under the law, government transparency, accountability for government actions. And we are just not seeing that right now. And it is, it is alarming. I will say that. So, the league has done a number of things to really kind of stand up against this. Immigrants are the fabric of our communities. They're what keep our country strong. And so we've been standing strongly behind our immigrant neighbors and the folks here in New York. So we've done a number of things, including kind of public condemnation of enforcement practices. We've spoken out on the New York State level, but also on the national level, making several statements about the seriousness of this matter and how it can not only work to intimidate communities, but also suppress civic participation. We've also advocated for more federal oversight and limits to the actions that ICE can take. So we've asked for ICE and the Department of Homeland Security to be their use of force to be investigated. We've also rejected additional funding for ICE and immigrant detention, which, as you know, is still kind of pending in at the federal government level. We've done, as we always do, a lot of coalition and advocacy work to call our representatives and hold them accountable for ensuring these things take place and that they hold agencies to account. And then we've also worked to really expand this is not typically an area where the league has done a lot of work. And so I think a lot of what we've been seeing in the past few years has brought up the importance of, not only standing with immigrant communities in across the country, but also standing up for due process and standing up for some of these basic democratic tenets.
Well, we are all immigrants in this country of one form or another. It may be 400 years since our families came over, or it may be 4 days since our families came over. So we need to keep that in mind. You're quite right. We are a nation of immigrants, and the League is such a trusted voice. And so when we speak out, it really does help the situation. We're seeing other states respond to the crisis. In New Mexico, the Immigrant Safety Act was signed into law, which prohibits state and local governments from entering into agreements to detain individuals for civil immigration violations. It stops the use of public land for immigration detention and bans the 287G agreements that turn local law enforcement into immigration agents. Governor Moore in Maryland has signed similar legislation into law. Governor Hochul here in New York has proposed similar legislation, which would restrict local police from working with federal agents on civil immigration enforcement. barring state municipalities from entering into agreements that allow their officers to help ICE carry out its mission, and from losing local jails for ICE operations. This actually played out here in my home county of St. Lawrence in early February, with over 5 hours of public comment against entering into an 287G agreement between our local sheriff and ICE. And even in the face of overwhelming opposition, the county board voted 11-4 to sign the agreement. One result of that has been a spate of candidates who are now challenging sitting legislators, which is certainly good for democracy, as voters will have a choice when we go to the polls in November. But there's an even stronger anti-ICE measure called the New York for All Act, which has been proposed. Talk to us about what the New York for All Act would do if it is passed here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you highlighted that, Donna. This really is every year is a key year to get out to vote. We will always say that as the league, but this year in particular, we'll see some of these local races on our ballot this year, which is not typical due to some recent changes in New York State election law. But that makes it all the more impactful that you turn out and you really vote. Make sure you hit every race on that ballot, because some of these local elections truly have the biggest impact on your day-to-day life and the life of those that you love and the folks in your community. So, but absolutely, the league stands strongly behind another bill that's been proposed called New York for All. Essentially, in a similar way, essentially, the legislation would prohibit local police and state agencies from collaborating with ICE, except where legally required, but in effect, it prevents the use of state and local resources for federal immigration enforcement and restricts the disclosure of someone's citizenship or immigration status. Now, what Governor Hochul has proposed in her budget, which, I mean, there's always a silver lining. It's great to see that this is a priority for her and that this is something that's being worked on legislatively in some way. But we would support the much stronger New York for All proposal, which really is more inclusive, would really work to entirely ban 287G agreements, whereas Hochul's proposal is a little bit more limited. There's a few other kind of like loopholes that different advocates have identified with the proposal that Hochul has in the budget. So all that to say, we really think that New York for All is the most inclusive and effective measure to protect all New Yorkers.
And what we have seen is that if there is any wiggle room at all, ICE finds a way into a community or into a state. And so it's really incumbent on us in our state level legislators to really understand that and to plug those holes before anything more happens. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
And yeah.
go ahead. So that would be New York for All. That would be our strongest response. And you just said that the league stands behind New York for All. So, and that's a great thing. There's additionally some other laws that have been proposed to protect New Yorkers, and these include S9462, which would say law enforcement has to show their faces. No more masking of these agents on the street, which is terrifying to see people with guns and all of their equipment, and then their faces are masked. So you presume they're law enforcement, but you have no really idea of that. And we have seen cases where people have imitated ICE agents and harassed citizens. So that's a problem. There's an assembly bill similar to that, no masked law enforcement at all, and another state Senate and Assembly bill with no ICE on school grounds without a warrant. Has the league taken a position on any of these positions? Do you know?
Yeah, so we've certainly taken a position on that assembly bill that you noted, the no mask law enforcement. We are an organization that strongly strongly advocates for transparency, and that's at every level of government. And so that includes our law enforcement officers. Is truly no reason why there should be masked law enforcement officers working to follow the rule of law in our state. And so we absolutely support that bill. We do support, and we supported publicly in our budget testimony. There is a proposal in the governor's proposal, which would make a series of sensitive locations at which ICE would not be able to go without a warrant. So that would include schools, and it actually did not include poll sites. So that's something else that we're working on separately. But yes, no, we absolutely agree that children are in school to learn, and there should the fear of parents about the retaliation or actions taken by federal law enforcement should not prevent them from sending their children to school to learn. So we absolutely
And
support
we've
that.
seen in other communities where school participation has dropped off significantly when ICE is in the area because there is that fear. And it isn't so much maybe that your children are the children of immigrants, is you just don't want your kids near any opportunity for that kind of violence. It sets the wrong message about what should be happening in school, and it certainly can be very terrifying for any of us, let alone young children, to see masked and armed people in a public building like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
So we've also seen a lot of public protest to ICE in many communities, which is starting to actually have an effect. And of course, that was led by the wonderful people of Minneapolis, who really showed us how to do nonviolent protest over weeks in the face of tremendous provocation and a lot of tragedy. Those with people actually being killed by ICE personnel in those communities. One area of concern has been the growth of ICE detention centers around the country. Currently, there are about 237 of those such centers in the US, with contracts being attempted, it seems like every week, for more. Hundreds of protesters actually filled a senior center just outside of the small village of Chester, New York, to fight a proposed detention center for up to 1,500 immigrants in that small town. And that was, by the way, a bipartisan opposition. So no one really wants to see these kinds of facilities in their community. And we know from reports all across the country that they are not properly run. They are not, the health and safety of people who are detained is not being maintained. I just read a report yesterday about pregnant women who are in these detentions who are not allowed to see doctors. They are not being cared for properly. They're a travesty that the federal government would be housing these kind of things. So league members have been leading and participating in these fights to safeguard their communities from ICE incursions and protect democracy. This is really what we do, isn't it? This on the ground, grassroots kind of action is what league members do.
It is. It's one of the things that makes our organization such a strong organization is that we truly, we really build from the bottom up. And the fact that we have boots on the ground, as we say, across the state and across the country really lends legitimacy and power to the work that we do. So I mean, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think in 2025 alone, we saw at least 32 people who died in ICE custody. And as of January of this year, January 27th of this year, and this was, I think about a month ago, these numbers came out. Already, we'd seen 9 people die in ICE custody or at the hands of federal agents. And that is, this is something that I know we've been hearing more and more about, but I don't think we can harp on it enough, right? This is a serious issue and something that everyone needs to be thinking about and working to take action on. And so local leagues have absolutely been doing this work on the ground. As you noted earlier, some of the work that we've been doing is working to prevent the collusion of ICE and local law enforcement and police. Not to be too numbers heavy, but I found it interesting that as of now, across 39 states, we've got just over 100 or 1,300 agreements, 287G agreements in place compared to the 135 that we had in place in December of 2024. So that was a pretty shocking number to me and kind of amplifies the work that is still out there and out there to be done. In addition to some of this work on the ground, local leagues and our members have been working to hold elected officials accountable. We always say, we're a nonpartisan organization, but that does not mean we are not political. As soon as someone is in office, it's our duty and responsibility to ensure that they show up and do the job that people elected them to do. So holding those folks accountable and asking them, how do they intend to keep all New Yorkers safe? Really asking, we need specifics, clarify how the rights of individuals in New York State, all individuals, will be protected and how folks will be kept safe during this incursion of federal activity. We
Well,
also,
go
oh,
ahead.
no, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
No, I just want to say, we've also been working, as I noted earlier, this isn't our wheelhouse, hasn't typically been an area that we've done a lot of work in. And so we know that the strongest voices are going to be the folks that are directly impacted. So we've also been working with immigrant rights organizations and coalitions across the state to boost their messaging and really plug in wherever needed to ensure that that we can drive drive the plan and drive that action forward as they've been doing this work for far longer than we have as an organization. So
But the truth is that the League is a great collaborator and that we often work in coalition with other groups to amplify messages. And there's almost nothing that's more important than what we're working on right now than this, because this is fundamental to a democratic republic, is that people can assemble, that the Bill of Rights has meaning, and that everyone can trust that the Bill of Rights has meaning and they are protected. One of the things that the League has done this year is we're very much involved in No Kings.
mhm.
It's going to be happening on March 28th. And that's an important collaboration of many, many different groups across hundreds and hundreds of communities across this country. And this particular one in March, at the end of March, will be the biggest one yet. It'll be the third one and the biggest one. So the League should be visible in that, and we will be, won't we?
That's right. That's exactly right, Donna. Gosh, there's so much going on. It's hard to remember it all. We will absolutely be participating in No Kings. And one of the things that we'll be doing there and encouraging our local leagues to do on the ground is really using these spaces as kind of, recruitment events, both, not only working to make sure everybody's registered to vote and informing people about what's going to be on their ballot, but also getting more folks involved with the league. We're working to launch a strong election protection task force in advance of this upcoming primary and general election season, as well as a really strong observer corps working to strengthen observers across the state. And those are people who do just that. They observe, whether it be, for example, observing the actions of law enforcement officers, or whether you're observing in a more formal setting at a town hall meeting or a board of elections meeting. But all of these little pieces are things that build up to a strong democracy and allow democracy to work the way that it can. And if we don't have one of those pieces, like you noted earlier, if our ability to speak freely or to protest on an issue is hindered, it chips away at that democracy. So there's a lot of work to be done, and league members are certainly on the ground doing that work.
Well, there's always room for extra shoulders at the wheel, that is for sure. And we've seen that locally, how energized the general public is by the thought of and the threat of ICE training our county deputies. I've never seen the outpouring of outrage and concern that I have over this issue. And this is not isolated at all to our county. This is happening everywhere across this country. And as you know, 2026 is a critical election year. And so we need informed voters who are paying attention to the issues locally at the state level and at the federal level, because we will be electing House and Senate members this year. So, and one thing we know, unfortunately, is the Congress has been missing in action this year. And so the only way to get them to pay attention maybe is to change who we send to Congress. And that'll be our opportunity in November. So, Erica, tell us about Vote for One. 411, which is a league information site, isn't it? About how that works and how people can get more information about their local ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that is it's a core tenet, or core, I keep saying tenet, it's a core piece of what we do. Really is educating voters to ensure that when you get to the ballot, you know who's gonna be on that ballot and who you're gonna be voting for, and that you get to the right place on the right day. So the first election that folks will need to have on their radar is going to be the primary election, which will happen June 23rd of this year. There are a number of early voting dates that are just before that, 9 days of early voting. And you can use Vote 411 as a great tool to find out more information. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about our elections. So you can go and make sure you hop on, plug in your address, and you can make sure that you're registered to vote. If not, it'll direct you to where you need to go to register to vote. You can find your poll site. Poll sites have not yet been finalized for the primary, so you won't yet see your poll site on there if you go on. And then as we get closer to the primary, local leagues across the state are going to be working to ask questions of candidates on the ballot about issues that impact their community directly. And those candidates will respond, and those responses verbatim are sent out to the community. So you can compare different candidates side by side, and really get an idea of who stands, most strongly with your beliefs. So that again, you can be educated and activated and not only ready to make a plan to vote and go vote, but to get three more people to join you in doing that.
And I think this is the perfect time for us to start to talk about the SAVE Act because nothing threatens the vote more than the SAVE Act, which has passed the House and the Senate is now contemplating it. But just give
Mhm.
us a quick update on how bad the SAVE Act will be for voters because it'll cut
Absolutely.
millions of people out off voting rolls, won't it?
Yeah, so the SAVE Act is actually now in its second version. So now it's called the Save America Act, and it's even worse than the version that was previously proposed. Essentially, what the Save America Act would entail is it would mean that anyone registering to vote would need to provide documentary proof of citizenship before registering. So if you are, and what does documentary proof of citizenship look like? It typically is going to look like your birth certificate or your passport. In a place like New York State, for example, you can get an ID in New York State and you can get a driver's license. You don't necessarily have to be a citizen to do that. So that, like your driver's license, would not count. Now, passports are expensive. They're expensive to renew, expensive to get. We know that a large percentage of the population does not have a passport. And this is primarily, we know that not having a passport or something like this would drastically impact voters who historically have already been disenfranchised, voters like rural voters, voters in communities of color, voters who it's really there's a number of different folks, voters with disabilities. There's a number of different folks that this would impact. So if you don't have a passport, then you think about your birth certificate. And I don't know about you, Donna, but I've got a vague idea of where my birth certificate is, but I'm not positive. And even if you do know where your birth certificate is, there are just about 5 million women in New York and 69 million nationwide that changed their name when either they got married or they've changed their name for another reason. In addition to that, we know that there are tons of folks in our trans community who have also changed their name. And so if your name does not match the name on your birth certificate, you will likely have to provide additional documentation to prove that you are who you say you are. Now that's just register that's just registering to vote. But this bill would actually make it that much worse so that when you go to the polls, you would also need to provide proof of ID, and that can look different in every different state. Right now in New York, you do not need to provide ID when you go to the polls. We have a bipartisan team of election officials that ensure that every single voter who's on our rolls is eligible, is a citizen, and is able to vote in that county and in that jurisdiction. So all of that due diligence is done on the front end when someone is registered. Your name and all of your information is cross-checked against federal and state databases to do that. And so, there are tons of studies out there that have found that voter ID laws are just not effective. And instead, what it does is it continues to disenfranchise voters who may not have an ID, may not, there's a variety of reasons why it would become more difficult for someone to vote if they don't have that ID easily accessible to them. And we know that it doesn't have any serious impact on, this purported voter fraud that we keep hearing about. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than to commit voter fraud, and so it's very rare. And laws like this just do not have the impact that some of the legislators in our federal government are saying that it will. So I'm sure you didn't expect that long of an answer, but
Oh, well, I'll tell you, I'm about ready to hurl a thunderbolt myself because I'm one of those voters. I've been voting for over 50 years. I started voting when I was 18. That was when I registered to vote. I was a high school student.
yeah.
Obviously, I registered under my maiden name, not my married name, but I've been voting for 50 years under my married name. And so if somebody tells me that I can't vote, I am not going to be happy with them. And this is a travesty in a country like ours where we have always had confidence in our electoral system. And that confidence has been torn away because of misinformation and lies, misinformation and lies. We have a completely secure voting system in this country. And if we disenfranchise millions of people, they're going to pay attention to that and not in a good way. So, Erica, as we close out here, many local leagues are finding that people are eager to learn more about what is happening to our democracy, and the league has the tools and the capacity to help them understand the issues and take action. So, how can people join the league? Because there are no barriers to league membership, are there?
There are no barriers to league membership, and I will tell you how to do exactly that. But I've just got one more thing to say
Oh, go
about
right ahead, my dear. Go right ahead.
I think you highlighted something important, and it's really that is that we've got to call out exactly what's happening, right? Which is our elections are run by the state. That is constitutionally how they should be run, and there has been a drastic attempt to nationalize our elections and to interfere at the federal level with the basic process of our elections, and that is not how our elections are safe and secure because they're disparate, right? And because they're run differently in each state. And this concerning attempt to interfere in that process should be of extreme concern to every voter out there. Now you can join the league and help us work on issues just like this by going to our website is the easiest way. It's www.lwvny.org. And you'll see at the top, there's just a join button, and then you can use a drop down to find a local league near you. And you can join today and get involved just as easily as that.
And I think it's also important to remind folks that we have a sliding membership scale.
We
So
do.
we don't ask people you have to write a certain size check to be a member of the league. It is based on your ability to pay and your enthusiasm for democracy. So
Absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you for coming in today, Erica. Thank you for all the work that you do in the office, along with your colleagues down in Albany, who keep this important organization running. And let's face it, the league is more needed today than it was in 1920 when we got started, isn't it?
Terrifying but true.
Yeah,
Yes. Always.
exactly. So we will stay in touch, and as events and information warrants, we'll have you back.
Sounds good. Always happy to be here, Donna. Thank you so much for having me. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you for coming in. Reminder to our listeners that these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, the North Country matters, and so does your vote, so protect it, because there are forces of evil out there coming after us, and we have got to stay strong as a nation in order to be who we are as a nation.